Hi, welcome back for more work on our percents. We are going to transition from doing mental math computation and just estimating where things are to finding the actual percent of a number. Since the questions always have this word of there, it might be a really good thing to jot down for yourself that the word of in math typically relates to clues about multiplying. I'm not going to say it's 100%, but in a lot of problems where we have the word of, if we change it to a multiplication problem, we can get there. But before we jump into finding actual percents, let's do one more review on estimates. Right here, this is a survey on pet ownership. Out of 345 students in 7th grade at PRT, I want to know about how many of them own cats. So read this graph and fill it in with me. What percent have a cat? Well, you have to learn how to read a key. Cats are here, the red blocks, so you look here, that is 30%. Whenever you write percents, you do need to put your percent sign with it to get credit. 30% of 345 might be a bit tricky, but if we round 345 to 350, that can be nicer because I know that 30% is 3/10. So remember, if I find 1/10, I can come right here, one spot to the left, 10th spot. So I have 35 would be 10%. And so to get 30%, I would want to multiply that by 3. So then I could say 30% is 35 times 3. I don't know if you guys are good with your mental math with things like this, but if you do 30 times 3, you should know that that's 90. And then if you do the 5 times 3, that is 15. So 90 and 15 lets me know that approximately 105 students of the 7th grade at PRT own a cat, if this survey was accurate for our students. All right, so let's see if you can do your estimation techniques with the rabbits. Push pause on the video, try it out, and then come back and check yourself. All right, here's my estimation. To find 5%, I first found 10%, and again, I imagine that was being 350 instead of 345. So 10% came out to be about 35, or if I just move my decimal left here, 34.5 would be like 35. And so I know 5% is half of 10%, so I wanted half of the 35, which is 17.5, so I just said about 17 or 18 students would own rabbits. I want to make sure you're actually listening to this video with volume up. So if you are listening to me, then right here in this white space, draw your best example of a rabbit real quick. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it. And then let's go on to the examples for the day. If you need more time to continue your rabbit drawing, just push pause. Otherwise, here we go. Please notice that these examples are divided up into two parts. These left two are on using fractions. These right two are on using decimals. We are going to have you practice both, but then you'll get to choose the one you like better as we go forward in the chapter and do other work. Number 1 says to find 7% of 300. If we're turning this into a fraction, what do you know about 7%? What are percents always out of? Hopefully you remembered that's 100, so it'd be 7 over 100. Here's that clue word of I told you about that we're going to be treating as multiplication, and then we're doing it times 300. Well, 300, to make it a fraction so I could actually multiply fractions, I'd put that over 1. And then you can cross simplify to make smaller numbers. 100 and 300 are both divisible by 100, so it becomes 1 and 3. So when you multiply across, you get the 7% of 300 is 21. Or you didn't have to cross simplify. You could have left the word of, and you could have said, well, I know that 1/100th of 300 is 3, because tenths, hundredths. But I don't want 1/100th, I want 7/100ths. So you could have taken that 3.0 or 3 times 7, and that would lead to your 21. All right, let's try example 2. That one says find 75%. You could either start out as saying 75 over 100 times your 280, or you could know 75% is one of those that you should have memorized. It's like 75 cents, 3/4, so 75% is 3/4 of 280. I'm going to choose that one because I see that the 4 and the 280 are nice to cross simplify because it's like a 28 and 4. So I'm going to do that one. I'll put the 280 over 1. I will cross simplify here, saying 4 divided by 4 is 1. 28 divided by 4 is 7, so 280 divided by 4 is 7D. And then when I multiply across, I can do this 3 times 7, which is 21, but I still need that 0 placeholder in the one spot, so it's actually 210. And then, of course, we're going to check if our answers are reasonable. Okay, so here 7% means a tiny little bit of 300, so 21 is a tiny little bit. That's correct. 75% means more than half, and a lot more than half. Well, half of 280 would be 140, and this is a lot more than that, so that works out for me to check to make sure that my answers are in the right spot. Examples 3 and 4, we're going to use our decimal method, which means instead of putting the fraction over 100, we're going to move the decimal to make it tenths hundredths. So I'll take this decimal and go tenths hundredths. That's like dividing by 100. And so it would be 0.163 times, or if that's going to get you confused with your decimal point, you can do a little x, but don't get it confused with the variable x, 59. Or, like in algebra, you know, so you don't get confused with the dot or the x, you can show things are being multiplied by hooking them together. Either way. And then I do not expect you to work that out by hand. You are allowed to type that directly in your calculator. And if you type that in, you get 9.617, or 9 617 thousandths. There's no need to round it. It did not ask us to estimate. And if it's a decimal that truncates or ends nicely like that, you may as well keep it all. There's no need to round just to get rid of one number, unless the directions say so. Again, let's check if it's reasonable. If I move my decimal one spot over, I know 10% would be 5.9. So 16% needs to be a little more than 5.9, and so that is right here. That's looking good. Okay, last one. 48% is 48 hundredths, because 48 over 100, or I can go tenths hundredths. There's a decimal to go, so I'd say 48 hundredths of, which means times, 6 32 hundredths, or 6.32. Let's type that in the calculator. Well, look what happened when I typed it in my calculator. I got 303 36 hundredths, which luckily, since I was using my mental math strategies, I looked up here and said, there's no way. That's not even possible, because 48% means about half, about 50%, and half of 6 point something is going to be like 3 point something. So I pulled out my calculator and typed it again, and I realized I just accidentally didn't push hard enough for that first decimal point with the 48, so that is not my actual answer. My actual answer is 3.0336. So this should not go here. My eraser's not working for some reason, but it should go right here. I double checked on my calculator and it did work there. So 3 and 336 10,000ths. That was a great thing that you should always do on tests and quizzes. Go back and check if your answer is reasonable, because I didn't realize I had not pushed my decimal point. I just caught it because I knew there's no way the answer can be up in the 300s if I want it to be half of 6.32. All right, let's see if you understand. You have 3 U-try problems here. One of them, you have to use a fraction. One of them, you have to use the decimal. And the last one, you pick just which one you like better, or you can try it both ways and see you get the same answer both ways. So push pause on the video, work those 3 out, show your steps, and then come back and check yourself. Okay, check your answers here. The first one, 8 over 100. I could have simplified that fraction if I wanted, but I decided to go ahead and multiply across and then simplify at the end, because if I left my 100 in the denominator, then instead of having to simplify a fraction, I could remember that just means to take the numerator and go 2 spots to the left because I'm dividing by 100. So it's tenths hundredths. So I knew my answer was 8 4/10 that way. The 45% becomes 45 hundredths in decimal form. It's just like being over 100, but it's in the decimal place. Of means times, so I multiplied that by 432 on my calculator to get this answer. I know it's reasonable because this is a little bit less than half, and half of 432 would be 200 something, so this is a little bit less, so that's good. You could have put 25 over 100. I could have put 0.25. I went ahead and took it as the fraction that I have memorized. Times the 380, I multiplied straight across, and then I treated this fraction bar as a division sign, so 380 divided by 4 on my calculator. Let me know it's 95. 0.25 times 380 also would have been the same. Alright, to wrap up this example, we're going to look at special percents that are more than 100% or less than 1%. For some reason, I have students freak out, or I have students change what they're doing, even though you just follow the same exact process. Percents are always out of 100. So for on this first example, if I'm going to use that fraction method, I would put 110 over 100. Not over 200, not over 1,000. Don't make up your own denominator like sometimes my students do. Percents are always out of 100. And then they say, but then that makes it wrong. That makes an improper fraction. And I say, yes, it does. An improper fraction means it's more than one whole. And I know that's correct because it's more than 100%. So it's more than one whole. So that is correct. So I put 110 100ths times my 70 over 1. I'm going to go ahead and choose to cross simplify these both by 10. So 100 divided by 10 is 10. 70 divided by 10 is 7. And so when I multiply straight across, I get 770 over 10, which means I know I can take that 770 and just move my decimal one spot left to go tenths. So then I know that the answer is 77. You could have also done it with the decimal method from the beginning. You could have said I'm going back tenths, hundredths, 1.1 times 70. That would be great, and that would equal 77 as well. Or this one you actually could have done with your mental math that you already know. You know 100% of 70 is the whole thing, is 70. 10% of 70 is a tenth, so move the decimal back one spot to get 7. So 70 plus your 7 could have gotten you 77. So you know lots of ways you can answer that one, and any of them would be fine on tests and quizzes or homework. Example 6, again, people freak out if they see like a fraction within a percent. My suggestion to you would be to go ahead and divide that. So 3 divided by 5 on your calculator is 0.6. So make that 0.6% of 200. Now that does not mean multiply 0.6 times 200. It's still a percent, which means I still need to get it to the hundredth spot. So tenths, hundredths. There's an empty space here, which means I need to show that by putting a 0 in its place. So it becomes 0.006, or in other words, 6 thousandths times 200. And then you are certainly welcome to type it in your calculator, but you shouldn't need it. You could say 6 times 2 is 12. I have these 2 extra zeros at the end here to hold place values, so I need to put those on my answer. But then also, my decimal here was 3 spaces back, 1, 2, 3. So in my final answer, I need to move my decimal back 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3. It would land between the 1 and the 2. So then I know my final answer is 1 and 2/10. Again, if you're trying to do mental math and you're not sure if that's right, you don't have your calculator handy, you can check if it's reasonable, because 3/5 of a percent is less than 1 whole percent. And you know how to find 1% of something, guys, because 1% means 1 out of 100. So 1/100th. You go 2 spaces back, that would be 2.0. So my answer should be less than 2.0, which it is. Alright, so now it's your turn. You have some word problems to try applying this. It shouldn't be anything different than what we've already been doing with you. Just try to apply these skills to a real life setting. Push pause, and once you've worked them out, come back and check yourself. Alright, how'd you do? My tax was 8.9% of $47 for the backpack. So I used the decimal method by moving 2 spots back. So 0.089 times the 47 lets me know that my tax will be $4.18. But the question did not ask how much tax is it. It asked, is $54 enough for his backpack? So I took the cost and I added the tax on. So his final total will be $51.18. So yes, he has enough money with his $54. For the Pirate Bay Water Park, if you're interested in going there with a 20% discount coupon, I moved that decimal back twice, 0.20, but I don't need a 0 placeholder for the 100th spot, because if I have 0 in the 100th spot, I have nothing. So I just wrote it like this. Times $35.95 told me that you can save $7.19. Since this was a tiny box, I did not write my sentences for those word problems, but you know to do that normally. If these were tricky for you, these word problems, don't fret. We're going to have full lessons on what to do with taxes and what to do with discounts. You'll get to practice that a lot more in its own lesson. We just wanted you to kind of see a real life way of how percents are used. Also, on those types of problems, you always want to read carefully, because this says how much could he save, how much could you save. If the question says how much would you pay after this discount, I would have had to take my amount and subtract the discount away to see how much was left to pay. But that will be another lesson. Good work today.